This is Brenna Quigley, your personal geologist and terroir guide. Join me on a road trip through the geologic history of your favorite wine regions around the world. This is Roadside Terroir. Season 2, Burgundy's Côte d'Or, is made possible by our Season 2 partners, Becky Wasserman Co, La Paulee, and Acker Wines. We're determined to keep this content free and accessible for everyone. We're still actively fundraising for this season and future seasons of the show. To learn more about sponsorship opportunities, please get in touch by emailing us at contact@roadsideterroir.com. If you'd like to support our show personally, please consider becoming an insider or donating to become a Season 2 patron. Insiders and patrons have access to lots of cool stuff, including extra photos, illustrations, and extended interviews with all our guests. To learn more, check out our website, roadsideterroir.com, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Please don't drink and drive, and remember to keep your eyes on the road. This episode contains explicit language.
Okay. Come. You come and go.
It's a cool late summer morning in Burgundy as we load up the car and set out on the road. The sun, still low in the eastern sky, reaches out its long rays of dawn, illuminating the Côte d'Or and the dewdrops that hang on each blade of grass. I'm in the car with a woman who, until now, I've spent very little time with, yet has been a beacon of professional inspiration since I first started working in wine. Françoise Vannier is the geologist of Burgundy, and the queen of the Côte in my eyes and the eyes of many others. She's a geologist with a background in petroleum, who has now dedicated her life to terroir. She has slowly and steadily been creating painstakingly detailed maps of each village of the Côte d'Or. With each map, she explores mysteries, debunks old myths, and asks new questions. She's the world's expert on Burgundian geology, and today, she's our guide.
We can spend a while at the top of the hill and then go back further down.
This is great.
I'll show you tidal sigmoidal beds.
Oh!
I'm quite sure that there is a way to go there, but I don't.
Françoise is a small woman who bubbles with life and her passion for geology, which makes me feel very much at home. Françoise is so animated and has so much knowledge about the local rocks that facts seem to spill out of her mouth faster than she can think them, and certainly faster than we can digest them. Despite her speed and enthusiasm of speech, you can tell when you listen closely that she is absolutely measured, precise, and cautious. A true scientist whose brain automatically compartmentalizes the worlds of fact, observation, and interpretation.
I know that I can park my car there.
We're setting out on the start of our first real roadside exploration of the Côte d'Or. We drive north out of the city of Beaune to the northern edge of the Côte de Beaune, where we'll explore the Hill of Corton and the valley of Savigny-les-Beaune. This is a peculiar portion of the Côte d'Or, where vines of both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay compete for attention and prestige. Many people in the Côte d'Or believe that certain soils are predestined to grow either red grapes or white grapes. But where does this idea come from? Why are some villages better suited to red grapes over white grapes? Is it the soil, the rock, the climate, or has human history and wine style or popularity overprinted the natural order of things? As we explore these vineyards with Françoise, we'll attempt to discover if there are any geological answers to these questions.
I don't hear her.
You don't.
The same way. Have a look.
We're also joined today by our friend Michael Sager. Michael is a restaurateur, importer, photographer, and total wild man based in London. Officially, Michael came along to take photographs and document our journey, but was unexpectedly roped into helping out with our sound recording today as well, which he totally nailed and for which I'm extremely grateful.
Say, okay. Can you say something?
Hello.
Wait.
Hello. You don't hear me? I'm shouting.
I hear you, Brenna.
Hello.
I try to talk.
You're good.
You're good. I'm good. So,
yeah.
Great.
Leaving Beaune, we drive north along the famed Route de Grand Cru. This road was once called the Route Nationale 74, or RN 74. Despite wine lovers who cling to the name RN 74, which rings with the sound of Burgundian greatness, the road has now been officially renamed to the less whimsical D974. Heading north, the slope of Jurassic limestone is to our left, and the broad, expansive, flat plain of the Saône Valley is on our right. Local geologic lore tells us that somewhere buried below the Route de Grand Cru lies the trace of a major tectonic fault that extends along the entire length of Burgundy, clearly demarcating the great Jurassic-aged limestone terroirs of the Côte from the farmland of the Saône Valley, which is historically better suited to cabbages and autoroutes than wines fit for kings. Geologically speaking, the Saône Valley is nearly synonymous with the term Bresse Graben.
What's the breast crab?
The breast graben is
And how do you spell it? Breast?
B-R-E-S-S-E. It's like breast chicken.
Okay, breast and then graben.
And graben, G-R-A-B-E-N. So graben is that thing
graben, like
that
German
drops
graben.
in.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the breast graben.
The term graben is related to the German word for grave and describes the geologic trench formed by a fault-bounded block that has been down-dropped relative to the limestone slope to the west. Imagine a giant stair-step, but like really giant, like over 1,500 meters or 5,000 feet. The Saône River follows the trend of this depression, and its alluvial sediments have slowly but surely filled in this space over the course of millions of years. These sediments have completely blurred the line between the hard limestone bedrock of the Côte and a kilometer of unconsolidated alluvial Bresse marl. There is no obviously visible boundary between these two drastically different sedimentary and agricultural zones. And up until today, I had basically believed that you could stand in one place at the foot of the slope with 1 foot on shallow soils over limestone bedrock, and 1 foot above thousands of meters of unconsolidated, watery mush. The layers of limestone and marl on the western slopes have been intensely fractured by faults that run parallel to this major north-south tectonic boundary, again, like stairsteps. The once simple limestone layer cake has been broken up and shuffled like a deck of cards into the infinitely repetitive sequence of layers now exposed along the slope. This already complex geometry has then been further obscured by time, and millions of years of erosion has smoothed out the slope, erasing most of the topographic evidence of the faults on the surface. This is the story you'll find in just about every single book that exists about the terroir of the Côte d'Or. It's the basis of the explanation for the distinction of the Grand Cru vineyards, and for how and why the personalities of the wines can vary so drastically over such short distances. It's the hidden faults in the geology of the subsurface that create a patchwork of soils and a roulette of terroirs. Or so I thought.
Roughly, regarding the geology of the Côte, there are so many wrong things that are said all the time, and all the time some fake news regarding geology. And even also
Over nearly 2 decades, Françoise has been taking all of these stories, myths, and assumptions and putting them under the microscope. Her maps are dizzyingly detailed, and while she certainly doesn't set out to redefine the geologic history of the region, they do apply a precision of understanding and a realignment of reality that has never existed before.
Because people is very Manichaean, and they think that the world of the good with the slope and the limestone, and the world of the bad with marl of the breast, and the faults have not been drawn properly. And
Françoise jokes that this black and white understanding is silly, and that the idea of one long, continuous fault with over 1,000 meters of displacement is wrong. She shows us a cross-sectional seismic survey that cuts through the Côte and the valley.
You clearly see that you've got a pinch out of the Oligocene and...
This seismic survey gives us an image of the bedrock and sediments beneath the surface, and is clear geological evidence that it's not one fault, but a whole network of faults, more like a fault zone, that makes up this boundary, and that the deep, unconsolidated alluvial Bresse sediments gradually pinch out and overlap with the limestones below, rather than creating one distinct line that separates vineland from farmland.
There is no big fault. where is the big fault. And there are so many faults along the slopes with different compartments, major ones and some minor ones, and two main pinches out, one from the Oligocene and one from the Plio-Quaternary Mars. So, to my opinion, this is the synthetic cross-section of the coat. And you've got some faults, some transverse faults.
This is just the first of many wake-up calls we'll learn from her. It's an excellent example of her work and its significance, and further evidence that this already complicated region is even more complicated than we could have imagined. Even from a distance, the Hill of Corton distinguishes itself from the relative continuity of the Côte. It's a topographic monument, regal and proud, with a neat forest green cap and cascading skirt of steep patchworked vineyards. The Hill of Corton is just that, a hill, almost entirely separated from the east-facing Côte. According to Françoise, this hill marks somewhat of an unofficial transition from the Côte de Beaune to the Côte de Nuit. And for this reason, and perhaps many others, it's an exception in many ways. It's one of the few places in the Côte d'Or with vineyards that span nearly a full 360 degrees, north, south, east, and west. It's the only red Grand Cru vineyard in the entire Côte de Beaune, and the only Grand Cru vineyard that faces west. This Grand Cru appellation is the largest in Burgundy and is shared by 3 communes, or villages. As we drive closer, the village of Alox-Corton sits in front of us at the base of the south-facing slope. The village of Ladois-Serigny sits at the base of the east-facing slope, and the village of Pernand-Vergelesses is tucked back behind the hill on the west. Paul Wasserman passes this view almost every day as he drives between Beaune and his home in Bouillon, and he knows it like the back of his hand.
On the really southwestern to full western side, there's the historical heart of Charlemagne, which is En Charlemagne and Le Charlemagne. It's planted to white. So the whites continue mostly at the top of the hill as you start to face east, all the way from parts of Alos into Ladois-Serigny.
Corton is the only section of Grand Crus planted to a significant amount of both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and one of only 2 Grand Crus to produce both a red and a white wine, the other being Musigny. The majority of the east to south slopes, or the Ladois side, is planted to Pinot Noir, except for at the very top. And the majority of the south to west-facing slopes on the Pernod side are planted to Chardonnay. For the most part, Corton is Grand Cru Pinot Noir, and Corton Charlemagne is Grand Cru Chardonnay. The juxtaposition of these 2 noble grapes is actually quite rare in the Côte d'Or as a whole. Typically, either history, tradition, or terroir has dictated which vineyards are best at what, and we're here to see if we can figure out why that is and why this spot is so unique. Part of this reason might have something to do with the first Holy Roman Emperor, Charlemagne himself.
First of all, Charlemagne did own vineyards on the Hill of Corton, or at least land on the Hill of Corton. He got it from his grandfather, who confiscated it from the Burgundians because they didn't help out enough during the war with the Saracens. And the second thing to know is that Charlemagne was immortalized in a very old song as the emperor with the flowery beard. L'empereur à la barbe fleurie, except that fleurie meant white. So he was immortalized as the emperor with the great white Santa Claus-like beard. So the legend is that his last wife, whose name was Luitgard, was a young German princess whom everybody adored, including Charlemagne, and she objected to his great white beard being stained with red wine. So she asked him to switch to drinking white. Then Charlemagne ordered his land on the Hill of Corton to be planted to white grape varieties. That's the legend. There's 2 problems with the legend. First of all, Luitgard and Charlemagne were married in 794, I believe, but Charlemagne had already bequeathed his vineyards back to the church in 775, so that doesn't fit. And secondly, and more funny for people who grew up in France like I did, because you just know Charlemagne as the emperor with a great white beard, all historians agree that Charlemagne probably had no beard at all. It wasn't very fashionable for men at the time. And the reason he's seen with a beard is because it was simply customary to depict rulers with facial hair because it kind of underlined their virility. So it's almost certain that Charlemagne didn't have a beard. So that is the story. There goes the legend. Apart from the fact that he owned vineyards there, there's not much of it true. There's a more recent source.
It's hard to know exactly what was planted back in the 9th century or before. But throughout history, there's evidence that the hill was replanted back and forth from red to white and white to red.
What we do know is that by the 18th century, two main authors, Courtepay and Arnoux, mentioned that Corton used to have a lot of white wine that enjoyed great reputation. They state that recently disappeared in favor of the reds.
By the 19th century, popularity began to shift again, with most credit going to Maison Louis Latour, who popularized replanting the Hill of Corton back to Chardonnay.
So that's what we know. And you've walked in and you've talked to Françoise that a lot of it's white marl, certainly the top of the hill, and it just made sense to have white wine there. And it happened to be great, really great white wine.
So, in this case, it seems like the legends are just legends, and history might not have the answers we're looking for. While it might be pretty disappointing to learn that Charlemagne didn't even have a beard to worry about staining, debunking this myth leads us right back to where we started and why we're here, looking to the rocks for answers. It turns out there is at least some geologic component to this legend. Many local vignerons will say the rule of thumb is that white wines do best on white soils and red wines do best on red soils. Françoise does not agree.
If you hear the myth and the legends about Burgundy, if the soil is white, you cultivate the Chardonnay. If the soil is reddish, you cultivate the Pinot Noir. Unfortunately for Volnay, there are a lot of light color soil and they decided to cultivate the Pinot Noir instead of the Chardonnay. So.
We drive past the village of Hill of Corton towards Pernand-Vergelesses and begin to make our way up the western slope of Corton Charlemagne. It's morning, so we're still within the cool shade of the hill. We drive up through the vineyard Le Charlemagne, where the slope faces to the southwest. As the slope wraps around to the west, the vineyard changes from Le Charlemagne to En Charlemagne, En spelled E-N, which is claimed by the village of Pernod. Even though the commune has changed, we're still on the Hill of Corton and still within the Grand Cru appellation. We stop about halfway up and get out to explore the layers of limestone that make up the slope.
So you've got an outcrop of Ladois limestone with sigmoidal bedding, typically deposited under wave action. It's tidal deposits.
Here, Françoise points out a natural wall of limestone rock called Ladois limestone. The rock itself consists of broken up fossils, or shell debris, and is distinctly layered with thin beds of limestone only a few centimeters thick. The layers are wavy, or sigmoidal, and were formed by the tumultuous, changing tides on the ocean floor 160 million years ago.
Traditionally, this limestone is the best one for the roofs because the tiles are already pre-cut and you just have to take them. And in Ladois, you've got a big quarry where this limestone has been very well exploited to build the traditional roofs in Burgundy. And since 40 years, local geologists, they use the name Ladois limestone because it has been used in Ladois. Geologists are very, very boring people. They see a limestone in Premot, it's Premot limestone. They see another limestone in Comblanchien, it's Comblanchien limestone. So very often.
Françoise explains that the layer below this Ladois limestone is called Pernod limestone and contains nodules of chert. Chert is hard, glassy, microcrystalline silica, or quartz. This is a tricky part of the geologic story. There are at least 2 different layers of limestone around here that can contain these chert nodules, but they're inconsistent and can be hard to find. This Pernod limestone represents a period of geologic time when the depositional environment changed laterally, meaning that different types of rocks were formed at the same time, not very far from each other. The simplest way to explain this is to imagine that you and I are together at a lake. I'm standing on the sandy beach, and you have waded out into the water with your toes in the mud. This kind of geologic deposit is actually very common throughout the Côte de Beaune, and we call these lateral differences facies changes.
So you see the silica nodules there, the cherts, they are not silex, they are less perfect because you see very often they are not completely filled. You've got a kind of hurt with softer sediments, maybe richer in clay, and this is the limestone that contains the cherts. And clearly you see that the cherts develop at the limits of different beds because water circulated when it was still small fine-grained sands or something like that. And the silica nodules develop.
She explains that these chert nodules were likely once marine sponge spicules made up of silica, which dissolved and turned into globs as the sediments were buried and squished. The soils at the base of the hill sit upon yet another limestone called Corton limestone. The bottom of the slope is often deeper, having accumulated the slope wash from above, and are also often decarbonated, meaning much of the limestone has dissolved away and mostly clay remains.
You want to go up to the top of the hill to see the white marl?
Yeah.
Especially for red wines. For sure.
From our current position at the Ladois limestone, we begin our hike up the hill.
We are going not with bike, but we are going this way. Pardon, bonjour. So we are climbing in the marl.
So I have a big question about marl.
I've got small and so.
Yeah.
The bedrock of much of the top portion of the hill consists of white marl. By definition, marl is a type of limestone that consists of a significant amount of clay and is therefore often referred to as dirty limestone. Françoise is a geologist, so she's strictly speaking about a solid limestone rock that contains a significant amount of clay minerals. But we're on a slippery slope here. Marl can also be used as a term for soils or unconsolidated sediments, as opposed to bedrock, that contain a similar proportion of limestone and clay. This is what we mean when we refer to the Bresse marls out on the plain in the distance. The term dirty limestone usually makes sense when the rock looks grayish or brown. But here, the stark white color of the rock and soil doesn't look very dirty at all.
So you've got here some white beds, and those white beds are secondary limestone precipitations.
Oh.
You've got, 1 foot of soil, and very often when you've got some roots, you can see white cylinder around the roots because there are some chemical reactions due to the exchanges with the plant. This enhances the carbonate precipitation. So very often when you've got a marl, you can see white tubes, white pipes around the roots.
The white color comes from the high content of calcium carbonate in the soil. The calcium carbonate comes from the dissolved limestone. But then, because there's so much clay in the marl, it hangs out in place some more, where it can reprecipitate, often even forming a white casing around the roots.
And that's like super harsh for the vine. Like it gets kind of, some of the wines on like really white marls like that will taste really like harsh.
I ignore what happens because I'm not an agronomist, but the wines are with harsher tannins and I can't explain it. It's just an observation I made. I don't have any scientific explanation. But you're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
There aren't good answers.
So, it's a harsh environment which can correlate to a grippy, harsh, tannic texture in the wine.
So do you think by definition that a marl rock should be somewhat soft compared to limestone?
Softer, at least easier to break.
So would you also say that for the most part marls will kind of erode more smoothly on the slope because they weather more easily and they
exactly.
break up.
They are softer, they was less resistant to the erosion and they are going to disappear more rapidly than the limestone. Yeah.
To recap here, white marl has a lot of calcium carbonate, or is strongly calcareous, and it's softer than limestone, so it erodes more smoothly along the slope. It's certainly worth pointing out again that there is more white marl along the top of the slope of Corton, which also happens to be the part of the slope that is consistently planted to Chardonnay, even on the opposite side, which is mostly planted to Pinot Noir. Plus 1 point for the white soil's white wine legend. Even though our heads are spinning with questions about marl and clay and secondary calcium precipitation, we've already spent more of our day here than we'd planned. So we turn around and head back down the hill. As we near our car, Françoise leads us to an outcrop of rocks not far from where we started. But this one looks distinctly different than the ones we've seen so far today.
This is the breccia, voilà.
Okay, whole kind of wall.
And so I'm quite sure that this is a fault, and probably here
This breccia represents the trace of a fault that cuts through the layers of limestone we've just walked through. At the moment, Françoise is in the middle of producing her geologic study of Corton. So she understands the original geology quite well and is now identifying the locations of the faults and trying to decipher how they have offset and rearranged the limestone layers.
So what's breccia?
Breccia, it's a rock made up of pieces of limestone, and those pieces of limestone result of the movement between the two compartments. If you move one rock against another, it's not something very easy. So you've got some pieces of rocks that are cut, and you've got some angular pieces, and because you've got a fault, you've got a limit, so the water can circulate, rich in calcium and CO2. That's going to cement, to glue the pieces of limestone, and then you've got a new rock, only 25 million years old, that is made up of pieces of limestone that have been cemented by the calcite.
Movement along the fault grinds up the surrounding rocks, which later get cemented together by carbonate-rich fluids. This breccia provides an elegant illustration of the geologic history of the Côte d'Or. The limestone layers we've just walked through were deposited on a warm, shallow seafloor over 160 million years ago. 25 million years ago, as Africa collided into Europe, faults cracked through the now hard limestone bedrock. Since then, continued movement, weathering, and erosion has exposed these rocks on Earth's surface, where exceptional grapes have been grown for over 1,000 years. These grapes produced wines that were likely enjoyed by the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, who may or may not have had a beard. Today, we stand here witnessing all of this, which conveniently fits into the frame of Michael's camera lens, which Françoise insists also includes a shot of her hammer, for scale.
You want my hammer to make a scale? Because geologists are very strange people. They don't take pictures of their husbands or children, but of their hammer everywhere. My hammer in California, my hammer in Chile, my hammer in France.
Yes. Françoise for scale. No, you stay.
Whoops!
Oh my God.
No, don't worry. Voilà.
That's not hurting. Et voilà, merci.
You're welcome.
I love, that's a really nice photo.
Soleil. Very, very old motorbike.
I used to have one of those.
There were a lot in France in the 50s or 60s. But
As we've mentioned, Corton is a big, complicated place. 145 hectares, or 360 acres, split up between 3 villages. Plus, the confusion about what should actually be planted here, and therefore what the greatest wines should taste like. In this sense, I guess it's understandable that it is probably one of the least celebrated, or least appreciated of the Grand Crus in the Côte d'Or.
Oh, I think Corton is definitely underappreciated. It doesn't get the same respect. Blind tasting, you would always mistake it. Oh yeah, this is like Chambon Musigny. It's a little lean, a little brittle. It's red fruit. Chambon something.
This is Raj Parr, former superstar sommelier, now wine grower on the California coast. Raj needs no introduction, and you can hear more about some of his California projects in the first season of Roadside Terroir. Much of Raj's sommelier career focused on Burgundy, and he played a huge part in bringing Burgundy to the global acclaim that it has today, including the incredible program he put together at San Francisco's former landmark restaurant, RN74, named after the road we were just driving on.
Like Corton was forgotten a lot because the old books and a lot of the old wines we tasted were like always bony and crusty and austere. The black glass tastes like white wine, even the red wines. They aged very gracefully, but they had this kind of bony structure, and
Raj goes on to discuss how this wine texture relates to the geology of the hill.
clay being the muscle and the limestone being the bones, that's kind of obvious. If you walk up the hill as you have, suddenly you're walking like 4 steps on like gooey clay, and then you make a little turn and you're on a spine of pure limestone. You're almost going to slip off. This is where the clay go. And it really is this landmine puzzle where you don't exactly know where you're going to get some clay and where you're going to get hard, exposed limestone. So a lot has changed in Corton over the last 20 years.
Paul echoes this sentiment and goes on to say,
Corton remains unknown, underappreciated. We were all hoping that the arrival of Domaine and Romanée Conti on the hill was going to throw a spotlight on the hill, but I don't think it's happened quite yet.
In 2008, Domaine de la Romanée Conti leased a small section of Corton, and in 2018 added a parcel of Corton Charlemagne as well.
I thought that it would be really good for our team to have a challenge, but it was a difficult decision.
Here, Aubert de Villaine, the co-owner and co-director of the greatest domaine on the planet, explains what this meant to them and what they hope to accomplish.
When you read the famous Laval book, Laval puts the red Corton practically at the level of Chambertin, but of course limited to Bressande, Clos du Roi, Renard. So our idea is, little by little, to do the things that will put Corton at the level of Chambertin. I don't mean price, no. Right. I mean about the interest, quality. And when I look around, I see material végétal that is not at the top. If experience has told me something, you can have the greatest terroir in the world, the best climat in Burgundy. If you don't have very fine types of Pinot, you'll never reach the potential. It's as important as the soil, and it's sometimes forgotten.
Aubert points out that the care of farming is absolutely critical to understanding and expressing terroir, and believes that historically this may not have always been the case on the hill. Which makes me wonder if part of the confusion of what to plant has slowed down some of the precision in farming. Either way, Aubert takes this task very seriously and explains that they have even added a facility in Ladois in order to give their land in the Côte de Beaune the appropriate time and attention.
So suddenly, in the Côte de Beaune, we had almost 7 hectares. So I decided to create a unit of production in Ladois, Serigny. And now we have all what we need to cultivate Corton Charlemagne, Corton Rouge, Montrachet, etc. All the vineyards in Côte de Beaune are managed from this unit, and that was interesting because it obliged us to do things that we never thought we would do.
This is another example of how human behavior can impact the expression of terroir. Vine material and farming practices can be just as important, if not more, than winemaking. So, if we can assume the farming is a fit, what does Great Corton taste like?
So, Corton clearly falls in the camp of the more muscular wines. And by that, we mean that the tannic structure is pretty prominent. They are meant to age, and they're also very reasonable compared to the Grand Cru of the Côte de Nuit.
Both Raj and Paul point out that Corton reds can be bony and rigid, but that other factors, such as sites with heavier clay or warmer vintages, can add some flesh and weight.
In my overall idea, I've probably had better white wines, if there was one. But now, with slightly warmer climate, warmer years, the reds are getting fleshier, and they're very pure. They're very kind of precise.
David Croix, who we spoke to in our last episode, also farms a bit of Corton, his favorite being a small parcel at the base of the south-facing slope.
Now this is Corton, so southwest facing, bottom part of the slope, 60 to 80 centimeters of brown clayish soil, and then hard limestone. But for me, it's the terroir, Corton, that absorbs the whole cluster very much more than Beaune. So at 40% in Beaune, you would smell it a lot more than here. Here, for me, if I was asked blind, I would say there's 0. It's a red wine that almost has the balance of a white wine in terms of the saltiness, the freshness on the palate. It has characteristics of a white in a sense.
The whites on the hill also tend to be austere, especially compared to other great white wine vineyards in the Côte de Beaune, such as Montrachet. But here, the austerity is part of the charm. Perhaps the best known, and certainly most expensive example of Corton Charlemagne is made by Coche de Riz, which easily sells for over $7,000 a bottle. I can't say I've ever tasted this wine myself, but my understanding is that their winemaking style encourages richness to balance out the edges. In contrast, the Domaine best known for embracing Corton's austerity is probably Bonneau du Martray.
Bonneau du Martray comes into the story of Corton after the Revolution. They were a reference standard for Corton Charlemagne for a long time. And I think they became again once they went biodynamic in 2005. And they produced that style of Corton, which at its best is absolutely, luminescent, penetrating in a mineral kind of way, and tart and extremely vibrant. As we know, the Domaine got sold a few years ago. They didn't change a ton, so it continues to be Bonneau du Martray Corton Charlemagne.
The Domaine was sold to none other than billionaire Stan Kroenke, owner of the Los Angeles Rams, Screaming Eagle in Napa Valley, and Honada Vineyard in Santa Barbara County, which we visited in Season 1.
And first of all, that affects, on the western-facing side, it affects the sunlight. Much less morning sun and much more evening sun. According to Jean-Charles Lebeau de la Morinière, who was in charge of making the wines at Bonneau du Martray until the vineyard was sold, that's a defining character for the white wine. He compared it to painting, and he said that the Grand Crus of Montrachet are very outgoing, rich, and he compared that to, I think, Botticelli, a lot of light, and he compared Corton Charlemagne to Dutch painting, Vermeer, Rembrandt, with this much darker light. And he literally attributes that to the difference in sunlight. He says that when the sun sets, there's at least an hour more of sunlight in the evening on Corton Charlemagne, and that's where the character comes from. It's sort of reserved, it's colder light, it's intense light, less expressive, and it's phenomenal because it's reserved and hypermineral and very tense.
The Hill of Corton is a big place with complex geology and an even more complex history. Today, with increased efforts in farming, a better understanding of the terroir, and the presence of none other than Domaine de la Romanée Conti, it just might be entering a new stage of greatness. This is what Françoise describes as a typical succession, or stratigraphy, of the geologic layers of the hill. Corton limestone at the base, then Ladois limestone, a thin layer of iron-rich oolite, Pernod marl, and a hard caprock of Upper Jurassic limestone. From this west-facing vantage point, we turn our attention across the valley, where another slope with a cap of green forest faces us directly. These are the vineyards of Pernand-Vergelesses and Savigny-les-Beaune.
Then over here, is this Savigny?
This is still Pernand-Vergelesses. After the wood, you've got the first vines of Savigny.
Okay, so it's a mirror image.
Roughly, the series is the same. The ferruginous is not at the same elevation, so you've got one fault there. I will put another fault in the other valley because the elevations are not matching from one side to the other.
Even though the series of rock types is similar, Françoise can already tell that there is more complexity hiding beneath the surface. The rocks may have formed millions of years ago, but her work, and our work to understand the terroirs and the wines, is still ongoing. We make our way down and over to the east-facing slope opposite Corton Charlemagne. At midday, most of the varied slopes of this area are illuminated with light, with the southern exposures receiving the full power of the sun. The area tucked back behind the Hill of Corton is Pernand-Vergelesses. There's a small, relatively steep valley that continues back into the Haute Côte de Beaune here. The appellation follows the small alluvial fan that projects out of the valley and abruptly transitions to Savigny-les-Beaune along the east-facing slope. There are several intersecting valleys here, which Françoise points out align with major faults beneath the surface. Pernand-Vergelesses follows this small comb, but Savigny-les-Beaune encompasses a much larger, wider valley.
the Rouen, a huge river flowing from Savigny-les-Beaune to Choré. And no, I'm just joking, but during the coldest period, the flow was not the same. It was like a mountain river. We say torrent in French, and it carried a lot of alluvium, and for sure...
This larger valley follows a river, which I can't even begin to pronounce the name of.
It's an actual, I can never say the word of that river.
No, you can't. You can't. You shouldn't try. Rhoin. Rouen.
Okay. Don't even try.
Nobody can. Even the French can't. Rouen. Rouen. Rouen.
The valley cuts back into the Côte to the west and stretches over 700 meters from one slope to the next. And just like in Pernand-Vergelesses, there are vineyards facing each other on either side. In Savigny, the Premier crus on the north side face almost directly south, and those on the south side face to the northeast.
It's one of the rare valleys where a river is circulating, is flowing. But all the other combes, all the other valleys are dry valleys because they have been dug during the cold ice ages. There were no glaciers here. There were some glaciers in the Alps, clearly. There were some glaciers in the Jura, but here it was cold. But there were no glaciers, and the valleys were not dug by glaciers, but by sea.
Françoise makes a point of explaining that both the small combes of the Côte and the occasional larger valleys were all formed during the recent ice ages. So we're talking tens of thousands of years as opposed to millions. But she also notes that there's absolutely no evidence of true glacial activity in this part of France, meaning the valleys were dug by water when the ground thawed in the spring and summer, as opposed to being dug out by ice. This valley extends all the way back to the little village of Bize, the longtime home of the Wasserman family, and Paul loves to point out that the limestone alluvium we're standing on is derived from the cliffs surrounding his home. Further out to the east is Soleil, which sits on a deep alluvial fan of this very material.
A lot of alluvium, and for sure, a part of Savigny vineyard is lying onto alluvium. Alluvium is a good substratum regarding the vineyard because it's well draining and easy for the roots to deepen. Not necessarily the best Grand Cru. Nevertheless, part of Le Clos Vougeot or Les Échezeaux are lying onto alluvium. So,
Domaine Beau is based in Soleil and makes an excellent bottling of Choré in addition to their wines from the more well-known surrounding villages.
Choré is dominated by the alluviums of the Rouen, and that's why the vineyard is extending so far to the east. Most of the subsoils in Choré are well draining and favorable to the vine cultivation.
In Burgundy, you often get the sense that alluvial wines are seriously subpar to the bedrock terroirs on the slopes, which might lead you to believe that alluvial terroirs follow this trend globally. I encourage you not to fall into this trap. There are excellent wines produced from alluvial fans, such as Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Napa Valley, and most obviously Bordeaux. And there are also excellent alluvial wines in Burgundy too. A lot of this idea probably comes from the image of the Bresse marls, which we discussed and somewhat dismissed earlier. It's also worth keeping in mind that the deep sediments in the middle of the Saône Valley also likely come into contact with the water table, whereas stony alluvial fan vineyards from the combes can have deep, well-draining, rocky soils. Another major component of these combes and valleys is that they are also a source of cool forest air, something that is becoming more and more important as the climate warms. Françoise also points out that there is further geological significance to these combes, but we'll save that for another day. We're visiting with François de Nicolay of Chandon de Briailles, who is based in Savigny and has significant holdings here as well as in Corton and Pernod. They're a historic domaine, but have more recently gained a global reputation for pushing the limits of both farming and winemaking.
Really, the rise of Chandon de Briailles.
Here's Raj again.
Which has kind of created a ripple of ideas, which is now trickling into other wine growers around Burgundy. You know, when you do the history of wine in the last 100 years, they'll be as important a domain and really pivotal in the Hill of Corton because they have so many parcels making white and red and perhaps the best skin macerated wine in Burgundy, if not all of France.
As we head to the vines, François explains the history of the Domaine while pointing out some of his favorite vineyards as we pass by.
The Domaine started in 1834 with my great-great-great-great-grandfather, was Guillemot, and he had vines when he bought the property, and he built the winery and some new cellars for his activity. And my great-great-grandmother sold fields for cereals up there, and she bought the Corton, the 3.10 hectares of Corton.
Amazing.
Great-great-grandmother bought them. And then my father bought a very small part of Corton Charlemagne. And myself, I bought Savigny-les-Beaune, Secours, you know?
Yeah.
It's half of a hectare.
Yeah.
Here we are in the Savigny area. And now on your left and on your right, there are Savigny-les-Beaune. And our plot is just there. We have planted fruit trees here, you know, voilà. And this is a 2.6 hectares parcel. Now the 14 hectares are plowed by horse, 4 horses and 3 guys. And this is Savigny au Fourneau.
Okay.
Voilà. And now we are going toward Pernand-Vergelesses, the village. We can't see it now, but we're going to see it after. And the Pernand-Vergelesses starts here. Here is Savigny, and here is Pernand-Vergelesses.
And why is it called Ile-de-Vergelesses?
Because Ile means island, and in the books I could read, it means that island is the best part of something. It's the heart of
so
the...
Ile de Paris, Ile de France?
Yeah, ouais,
Oh my God.
ouais, absolutely.
J'ai jamais réalisé. Oh my God. C'est super.
That is true. Voilà.
We stop in the vineyard Ile de Vergelesses, which exists just on the border of Pernod and Savigny. The lower parts, Les Basses Vergelesses and Ile de Vergelesses, are in Pernod. And just above Ile de Vergelesses, on the east-facing slope, is Haut Vergelesses, which belongs to Savigny. All are Premier Cru. As we walk through the vineyard, François and Michael discuss the site and how it is farmed.
So it's our plot, it's like 4 hectares. There is about 3 hectares, 2.8 hectares reds and 1 hectare of whites. You want to walk down there or...
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to go?
Always.
Wow. Voilà, you can see the village of Pernod.
You converted to biodynamic.
We started in 2005, so we were totally certified by EcoCert and Demeter in 2011.
Okay,
Voilà.
génial.
Ouais. For the life, for us, the most important thing is the soil. And with the horses, we have decompacted a lot of very much the soils. So the soils are very alive. When it rains, for example, the water penetrates inside the soils, doesn't go out, or in the rivers, it stays here. When your soil is very alive, what you get is on the roots, you have those very, very tiny mushrooms, you know. They are like sponges.
Mycelium?
Mycelium,
Okay.
right. It's like sponge. It takes the water when it rains and it gives back the water to the roots when it's dry. It brings not only the water, but also the microelements, all the minerality, all the character, the typicity of the climate is coming from there. That's why it's very important to have alive soils. And after, we could see that the wines were fermenting differently, the élevage was different. When you were tasting the wines during the year, it was just very surprising the way it was going up. And a little frightening. Yeah. But at the end, say, oh God, so brilliant, so different. It's a very balanced terroir, you know, quite full body wine, quite mineral also, of course, and a little pepper. These wines can age as much as the Corton. We do love this parcel, actually.
No, because a lot of people say it should have been Grand Cru.
From Vergelesses, we continue to wrap around the hill, back into the vineyards of Savigny-les-Beaune, including Lavière and Talmet.
I think it's the best part of Savigny, really. You have this Lavière, Talmet, and if you go on the right side, on the top of Ile de Vergelesses, you have Savigny-aux-Vergelesses. Very nice terroir. It's just fantastic. You have white marrows.
And Paul agrees.
Savigny is one of my favorite villages in Burgundy. The Premier Crus are absolutely stunning. It's a big valley, so there's definitely 2 sides. The south side faces east and northeast. You have a very famous vineyard there called La Dominaude, which is not on every map. It's in Jarron, but mostly because of Bruno Claire and Pavlo, and actually Jadot. It's become quite a celebrated cru. Of course, below it, you've got Narbenton, where we have La Loubize-le-Roi, so that's also celebrated. But my true love is the other side, the one that faces full south. And there's just a succession of vineyards that benefit from the same light as Corton. They are incredibly varied, but it suffers from the reputation of having produced value wines, which, is kind of a death sentence.
Not that long ago, Burgundy was relatively affordable, and people stuck to drinking the greatest and most famed vineyards because they could. Today, villages that were once under the radar are still barely within reach of mere mortals like me.
Also, the large alluvial fan made the valley floor wines very rounded. And back in the days where people prized minerality, that wasn't okay. It's very okay today. We like, quaffable wines, gulpable wines.
Both Savigny and Pernod produce both red and white wines, even if the reds are slightly more plentiful. Alluvial soils can provide a pleasant balance, even if they do tend to be slightly less serious. Fresh, elegant friendliness is translated by both grapes. The author, John Bonnet, once pointed out to me that it seemed like Savigny vineyards could do just about everything. And I think that's spot on. Sure, they might overall have a reputation of being soft and pretty, reflecting the significant alluvial fan. But the two opposing slopes are also packed with very serious wines with distinct personalities.
Pernand-Vergelesses, absolutely.
Here's Raj again.
Hill of Corton is many times as good as anything from Corton. So just the Chandon and Briailles example, my two favorite wines to drink from them are two opposite wines is the Savigny-les-Beaune, which is always the most open, it's the most delicious, red fruit, just always open for business. And then the Hill of Corton is always 2 years behind it. And I think that would kind of define Pernand-Vergelesses if you compare it to Savigny on the borders, on that side.
We continue west towards the village of Savigny and drive along the bottom of the valley with the name we can't pronounce, peering out at the vineyards that extend up the slopes on either side of us. In Savigny, we say goodbye to François and Françoise and head to our final stop of the day.
When you look at Savigny, just all you think of is Patrick Bize. You just think of his spirit and his energy, and he was always so proud to open an old magnum of the wine, and he would put it right next to any Grand Cru, and rightfully so.
One of the few historically great names of Savigny-les-Beaune is Domaine Simon Bize.
He was part of that gang who started tasting outside of the doors of their own cellars. That was novel. And they really were the first generation to systematically go out and taste. And he was part of that gang. He was less mentioned for a while because he was in lowly Savigny-les-Beaune, but he was considered a great, great, great winemaker. Tragically, he passed away in 2013, and Chisa and Patrick's sister Marielle had to continue while we're waiting for the children to take part. Hugo, the son, is actually working at the Domaine.
Chisa Bize, Patrick's wife, is originally from Japan. She was drawn here by Patrick and has been slowly leaving her mark at the Domaine, while also recruiting and cultivating what has now become a vibrant Japanese community throughout Burgundy. Paul and Chisa are close friends. He pulls the barrel samples and chimes in as she tells her story.
As you know, I'm not Burgundian, as you see. I met Patrick when I was 30 years old in Japan, in Tokyo. I came here in 1997 during the harvest time. Never left. The impression of Savigny is just Patrick Bize. Patrick Bize, it's very dommage. C'est dommage que vous connaissez pas Patrick Bize.
Patrick was this character.
It's special.
Special, larger than life.
At that time, Burgundy is not very international. It's very closed. It's very countryside. Mm-hmm. Nothing.
It was not the Burgundy you know today. There were not the restaurants. There were bad wine lists. It was, I left for a reason.
But actually, I was a very city girl at that time. Mm-hmm. I came here with fashionable or pantalon, trousers, and the big shoes. And when I arrived here, Patrick saw me and, "You? Out." Immediately I was fired. And then after we got a baby, and then I was a kind of housekeeper all the time. So I was in charge of making 50 plates for 50 people. I was making a good harvest lunch. That was my job at the beginning. Little by little, the children getting bigger and bigger, so I have some time for myself, and I was looking for what I can do. What is my place? Where is my place in the domain? At the beginning, there is no place for me.
Chisa was a banker in her previous life in Japan, so she decided to take a look at the Domaine's finances.
It was terrible. It was impossible. It was very terrible, and because Patrick sells only the wine he likes. And when I saw it, it's impossible. It was 2009. Patrick, who made a price list or everything, but I said, "No, c'est pas bon du tout." And then he said, "If you can do it." So, okay, no problem. Like this, I take over little by little his place in the domain, and I start to do the tasting, the takeover.
Over time, Chisa also developed an interest in farming and became particularly interested in biodynamics and attended the School for Biodynamics designed by Anne-Claude Leflèvre. Eventually, Patrick gave her a parcel to practice her new and unorthodox farming ideas. We begin the tasting by comparing two wines served blind.
On peut faire une expérience? On peut faire le Savigny avant le Perrier?
Ouais, si tu veux.
Attends, je prends. Ouais. So there's going to be a comparison of two Savignys. First you taste, then you say what you prefer, and then Chisa will tell us what it is.
Yeah, the first one was like a horse at a rodeo, you know, like it was like, felt very...
It was more wild.
Yeah.
The first one is more wild, okay.
I like number 2. I think it's got more acidity, more energy, more density.
I think we had a very similar experience, it sounds like.
So one is the very simple classical treatment, just the sulfur, copper, the standard treatment. The other one is only plant treatment.
The second one is only plant treatment. Yeah.
No copper sulfur or little copper?
No
Zero?
Copper. Zero copper.
Yeah, I love it.
We then continue to taste through the Premier Crus of Savigny, each one more expressive than the next.
For me, Fourneau is always very charming, but the last few years, it's getting more and more elegant. For me, the difficult passage is Marconnet, Talmet. For the first time, I got it.
Marconnet is the only Premier Cru of the Bizes on the southern part of the village. And even though it's a Premier Cru on the slope, it's marked by the alluvial fan that does all the north of Beaune too. And it's got that roundness to it. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. And really, really, really pretty wine. Yeah. Not a lot of it. 3 barrels? Top yes. 75 cases for the world? I don't know where it goes.
I don't know.
Despite the fact that...
For my retirement.
See? She remains a banker when it comes to allocation. It's Vergelesses, which is the traditional flagship of the Domaine. That austerity is very much white soil. It does produce leaner wines. However, with age, it just becomes extraordinary. I mean, it's really the flagship for a reason. Yet, it's aggressive. I mean, it's aggressive.
It ends, but then there's this like reverberation,
yeah,
I think, which is kind of what gives it length.
Salinity in the salt, you know, and the like really crushed stone tannins that are discreet but persistent. Wow.
disappointed vintage, but...
So in 2017 was the appearance of different wines at Bize, wines that don't necessarily fit what we think about Burgundy, like you have a maceration of Pinot Bureau called Acacia, you have wines with zero sulfur.
I didn't show this
to many people.
No, not so many people, because it's my curious. I start this kind of wine from my curiosity, but every year the curiosity wine I'm making more and more. So one day I have to sell because the...
Just keep the wine.
There are many parallels and continuations today from Patrick's life and legacy at the Domaine.
As far as I know, always whole branch. And he said, believe the grape, just believe. So do nothing. So always he said, do nothing. So that's what I learned. When something's wrong, we want to do something, but just believe. Believe something is very difficult, and do nothing is the most difficult thing.
Burgundy lovers around the world remain vehemently passionate about these wines and find comfort in the fact that Patrick's spirit lives on in Chisa, his children, and certainly in the wines themselves.
They're very contemporary, very relevant, and still stunning and full of soul. I think it's one of the most soulful domains we represent. Ah, ta-dam!
Time to go.
Time to go. No whites for us. Another time. We'll drink some in a restaurant. Okay, show's over.
Show's over.
As we leave the cellar at Bize, we walk exactly 10 steps before we hit our final destination, a little restaurant just next door called Le Soleil. Summer days are long at this high latitude, so even though we're headed to dinner and it's nearing 9 p.m., there's still some daylight hanging onto the horizon.
Wasserman in the vineyards. Ils inversent les V et les W. C'est impossible de changer.
Le Soleil is owned by Simone Bize, so it has an incredible list of back vintage Bize that you could easily spend your life working through. But it also has an extensive creative list of affordable, international, natural-leaning wines as well. The front of the house is run by Lola, Chisa's niece, who is all at once both warm and cool. The kitchen is run by a young couple, Leila and her partner Svante, who each boast very impressive Parisian resumes and a deep appreciation of the local produce, wine, and people. Together, the three of them have created an atmosphere that feels like home, only endlessly better, and represents the community that is building in Savigny right now.
There's a vibe in Savigny right now. Micro-négociants are not so micro anymore, like Chantrève, but there's also brand new Prix de l'Ours. There's Benjamin Gilbert coming out with his first vintage in several months. There are interesting people buying Savigny, like Katerina from Les Oreilles, David Croix. There's a great restaurant. There's a community. There's young people, and even Chenou, who's completely organic and biodynamic. There's some biodynamic farmers. You don't know the wines because they mostly sell grapes. So it's just the place, the time. It's probably linked to the fact that you're freer to go progressive when you don't have Grand Crus that need to represent something. I think there's more freedom. Yes.
You know, Chandon, the Briailles, and like Bize, they are more kind of startup wines from young producers coming off who have worked at both those domains and really kind of made a leap into high-level farming and making wines maybe in smaller places and smaller appellations, but really kind of focusing on vine health.
Both of these domaines have recently shaped young growers who have gone on to do great things. This includes Christian Knott, the chef de cave at Chandon de Briailles, who launched Domaine Dandelion in 2016 with his partner Morgane in the Haute-Côte. Guillaume Bott made the white wines at Bize up until just weeks ago. He and his wife, Tomoko Kuriyama, run the well-loved micro-négociant Chantrève, which has grown and expanded to include their own carefully farmed parcels in recent years. As it happens, the two met at Bize.
Right? Ça coûte combien ton système? Parce que déjà la carafe à tomoko en plastique avec la petite hélice.
Once again, our geologic investigation has pulled us into the world of the people who live here and how they care for their land. Over dinner, we discuss what we've discovered about red wine soils and white wine soils, and realize that once again, we've probably uncovered more questions than answers. So we'll just have to see what we discover next time. In our next episode, we head south to continue our investigation of Pinot Noir in the Côte de Beaune by visiting some well-renowned vineyards and visit with a few producers we're pretty sure you've heard of. We'll see you there. Thanks for listening. This episode is made possible by our Season 2 partners, Becky Wasserman Co, Paulee, and Acker Wines. Roadside Terroir is hosted and produced by me, Brenna Quigley, recording and sound engineering by Nick Canepa, and original music and sound design by Jeff Alvarez. This season wouldn't be possible without the support from all of you. Thank you for listening, sharing, emailing, and supporting us however you can. Check out our website, roadsideterroir.com, to learn how you can stay in touch and how to help support this season by becoming a Roadside Insider or a Season 2 patron. We would also like to thank our very first Grand Cru patron, Steve Lippin. Thank you so much for your encouragement and support. Thank you to our guests, Françoise Vannier, Michael Sager, Paul Wasserman, Rajat Parr, Aubert de Villaine, François de Nicolay, David Croix, and Chisa Bize. Thank you to Issa Islami, Jerusha Frost, Summer Stabe, and everyone else who helped make this episode a reality.
I was wrong.
What was wrong?
We're not going to Camille's tonight. It's Thursday.
Fuck.
We gotta try for Soleil tonight. Or tomorrow.
Stress. No,
I know.
tomorrow's closed. Maybe it might be closed. Why do I hear myself twice? Oh, that's fine. Oh. I'll stay away from you. So annoying.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than
how you would have
hearing
done
your own voice.
It's not possible.
You just have to pretend it's someone else's voice.
I guess.
Because my voice sounds different in my head, so you just...